October 1943, northern France. A locomotive fireman bends down, selects a coal lump from the tender, and tosses it into the firebox. The furnace roars. Steam pressure climbs. The train lurches forward, packed with Wehrmacht troops heading east toward the Eastern Front. The fireman wipes sweat from his brow and reaches for another piece. He doesn't know that one of the lumps waiting in that tender isn't coal. He doesn't know that in roughly 6 minutes his locomotive will cease to exist. The explosion comes without warning. No hiss, no smoke. Just a detonation so violent it tears through the boiler like a cannon shot from the inside. Superheated steam erupts in every direction. Metal shrapnel punctures the cab. The locomotive's entire front section buckles. Men on the platform scatter. The fireman, if he survives, will never understand what happened. The lump looked like coal. It felt like coal. It burned like coal until it didn't. This is the story of one of World War II's strangest weapons, not a gun, not a bomb you could see coming. A piece of fake coal that turned Germany's most vital infrastructure into its greatest liability. It looked harmless, almost boring. A lump of compressed rock no larger than a fist, painted black, dusted with coal powder, indistinguishable from the thousands of other lumps piled in rail yards across occupied Europe. You could hold it, inspect it, toss it into a furnace without hesitation. And that's exactly what the British wanted. By 1941, Germany controlled nearly all of continental Europe. Its war machine rolled on rails. Every offensive, every retreat, every shipment of ammunition, food, and fuel depended on locomotives, thousands of them, and every single one burned coal. The German railway system wasn't just important, it was irreplaceable. Disrupt the rails and you disrupt everything. The Allies knew this. Bombing raids targeted rail yards and bridges, but repairs came quickly. Tracks could be relayed in hours. Bridges are rare and built in days. Resistance fighters in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands tried cutting rails, planting explosives on tracks, but these methods demanded coordination, technical skill, and timing. They also left evidence. Craters, twisted metal, proof of sabotage that invited brutal retaliation. The Nazis didn't hesitate. Entire villages could be executed for a single act of railway sabotage. The British needed something different, something that required no expertise, no timing, no risk of being caught in the act. Something that could sit dormant in plain sight until the moment it was too late. The answer came from a small, secretive unit operating out of a countryside estate in Hertfordshire. Station 12. Part of the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, Churchill's Covert Warfare Division tasked with setting Europe ablaze through sabotage and subversion. Station 12 specialized in disguised explosive devices. Booby traps are hidden inside everyday objects, bombs that looked like logs, stones, or even animal droppings. Their mission was simple: make destruction invisible. One of their engineers proposed an idea that seemed almost absurd. What if you could hide an explosive inside a lump of coal, not beside it, not under it, inside it? So perfectly disguised that even someone handling it every day wouldn't notice. A weapon that didn't explode on a timer or a tripwire, but on heat. A weapon that would sit in a coal pile for days, weeks, maybe months, waiting patiently until someone shoveled it into a firebox. And then it would detonate. The concept was brilliant because it exploited Germany's dependence. Every locomotive, every factory, every ship boiler in occupied territory burned coal. Millions of tons moved through the system daily. If even a fraction of those tons were compromised, the paranoia alone would be crippling. Inspectors couldn't check every lump. There were too many, too much coal moving too fast. The weapon didn't just destroy locomotives, it destroyed trust. But building it was another matter entirely. The device had to be indistinguishable from real coal under casual inspection. It had to survive being thrown, dropped, and buried under other lumps. It had to withstand moisture, temperature changes, and rough handling. and it had to detonate reliably when exposed to the intense heat of a locomotive firebox, which could exceed 800 degrees Celsius. The engineers at Station 12 began with real coal. They studied its weight, texture, and surface imperfections. They analyzed how it fractured, how it absorbed light, and how dust clung to its surface. Then they hollowed it out, carefully, precisely. They drilled a cavity into the center of each lump and packed it with plastic explosive, not dynamite, not gunpowder. A stable, moldable compound that wouldn't detonate from impact or friction, only heat. The fuse was the critical component. It had to activate at a specific temperature, hot enough to ensure the coal lump was inside a firebox, but not so sensitive that it detonated prematurely during transport or storage. They designed a small chemical delay fuse encased in a heat-sensitive casing. When the temperature rose past a certain threshold, the casing would melt, the fuse would ignite, and the explosive would detonate. The timing was precise, roughly 6 to 8 minutes after being thrown into a furnace. Long enough for the firemen to move on, long enough for the train to be moving. Early prototypes failed, the hollowed coal cracked too easily, the disguise was unconvincing. Inspectors could spot the seams where the two halves had been joined, the engineers adapted, they switched to casting. They created molds from real coal, then poured a mixture of plaster, coal dust, and binding agents around the explosive core. Once dried, the result was seamless. No joins, no seams, just a lump that looked, felt, and weighed like coal, but they didn't stop there. Coal varies by region. Welsh coal is different from German coal. Silesian coal is darker and denser than lignite from the Ruhr Valley. If resistance fighters were going to plant these devices across Europe, the fake coal had to match the local supply. Station 12 produced multiple variants, some glossy and black. Others are matte and brown, some with sharp edges. Others are smooth and rounded. Each batch is tailored to blend into a specific coal yard. By 1942, production was underway. Thousands of these devices, code-named coal bombs or explosive coal, were being manufactured and shipped to SOE operatives across occupied Europe. They arrived in crates marked as supplies. Resistance cells received them with simple instructions. Place them in coal piles near rail yards, docks, and factories. Anywhere coal was stored and used. Then wait. The beauty of the weapon was its patience. A resistance fighter didn't need to time an attack, didn't need to be anywhere near the target when it detonated. They simply dropped a few lumps into a coal tender, a coal bunker, a stockpile, and walked away. Days later, maybe weeks later, someone would shovel one into a furnace, and the device would do the rest. The first confirmed detonations began appearing in German reports by late 1942. A locomotive explodes outside Lyon, another near Brussels. A factory boiler in the Netherlands ruptures without explanation. At first, German engineers suspected mechanical failure. Boilers were under immense pressure. Metal fatigue was common, but the pattern was too consistent, too many explosions, too many wrecked locomotives. And always the damage was catastrophic. Not a crack, not a leak, total destruction. German railway inspectors were ordered to examine coal supplies more carefully. But how do you inspect millions of lumps of coal moving through hundreds of depots every day? You can't. Not without grinding the entire system to a halt. And that was exactly the problem the British had engineered. The weapon didn't just destroy, it created doubt. What German intelligence didn't immediately realize was how the explosive coal was being deployed. There were no raids. No commandos sneaking into rail yards under cover of darkness, just ordinary people, dock workers, rail yard laborers, resistance sympathizers with access to coal piles. They would slip a few lumps into a shipment, mix them in with the real coal, and move on. The device was designed for deniability. If caught with one, it looked like coal. If questioned, the person could claim ignorance. And if it detonated, there was no evidence. The explosion destroyed everything, including the device itself. By 1943, the paranoia had spread. German railway officials issued directives. Coal was to be inspected before loading. Suspicious lumps were to be reported, but what made a lump suspicious? A strange weight, an odd texture, the inspectors didn't know, they were guessing. And the more they delayed shipments for inspection, the more they accomplished exactly what the British intended: disruption. In occupied France, the resistance escalated. They didn't just plant explosive coal. They spread rumors, whispers in rail yards that the coal itself was poisoned. The British had found a way to turn every lump into a potential bomb. The rumors weren't true, but they didn't need to be. Fear doesn't require facts, it requires belief. And the belief that any piece of coal could explode was enough to slow the entire system. German counterintelligence tried to respond. They attempted to create their own version of the weapon, hoping to use it against Allied coal supplies. In 1942, Nazi Germany launched Operation Pastorius, landing saboteurs on the U.S. coastline with orders to target American infrastructure, including coal depots. The saboteurs carried crude explosive devices, some disguised as coal lumps. But the operation failed before it began. The saboteurs were arrested within days. Their coal bombs, when examined, were easily identified: poorly made, obvious fakes. Germany's version lagged far behind British engineering. The psychological damage was already done. By mid-1943, rail traffic in occupied France had dropped by an estimated 60% compared to pre-invasion levels. Some of that decline came from Allied bombing, some from track sabotage. But a significant portion came from delays, inspections, and the refusal of rail crews to work with coal they didn't trust. Locomotives sat idle, trains were delayed, supply lines stretched thin. The German military responded with brutality. Entire coal yards were placed under guard. Workers suspected of sabotage were arrested, interrogated, and executed, but the executions only deepened the problem. Fewer workers meant slower operations, and the explosive coal kept detonating because the devices had already been planted weeks earlier, months earlier, sitting in stockpiles waiting. In one documented case from 1944, a German ammunition train exploded outside Lille. The official report blamed track sabotage, but eyewitnesses described the blast originating from the locomotive itself. The firebox had ruptured. The boiler collapsed inward. The explosion was so powerful it derailed the entire train, igniting munitions in the cargo cars. The resulting fire burned for 2 days. Rail traffic on that line stopped for 3 weeks while repairs were made. 1 lump of fake coal, 3 weeks of disruption. This was the weapon's true genius. Locomotives weren't easy to replace. Germany didn't have an endless supply. Each one destroyed meant months of repair work or the need to divert another locomotive from a different line. Tracks could be fixed in hours. A locomotive took months. And every month a locomotive sat in a repair yard was a month it couldn't move troops, ammunition, or fuel to the front lines. By 1944, as the Allies prepared for D-Day, the cumulative effect of these disruptions was significant. German reinforcements heading toward Normandy were delayed. Supply convoys arrived late or not at all. Rail schedules, once meticulously planned, became unpredictable. Commanders couldn't rely on the railways the way they had in 1940. The system was breaking down not from bombs dropped from the sky, but from bombs hidden in plain sight. Station 12 produced approximately 3.5 tons of explosive coal between 1941 and 1945. That's thousands of individual devices, distributed across France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, and even Germany itself. Records of specific detonations are incomplete. By design, the weapon's purpose was to remain invisible even in success. Many explosions were never reported as sabotage. They were logged as accidents, boiler failures, mechanical malfunctions, and that ambiguity was part of the strategy. If the Germans couldn't confirm sabotage, they couldn't retaliate effectively. And if they couldn't retaliate, resistance networks stayed intact. The fake coal wasn't the largest weapon of the war. It didn't destroy cities or sink fleets, but it achieved something more insidious. It turned Germany's greatest logistical strength into a vulnerability. Every piece of coal became suspect. Every rail yard became a potential target. And every locomotive fireman became unwitting collateral in a war fought with weapons that didn't look like weapons at all. The German war effort depended on certainty, schedules, predictability. The explosive coal introduced chaos. And chaos over time is corrosive. It wears down systems. It exhausts resources. It forces commanders to make decisions based on fear rather than strategy. Do you delay a shipment to inspect the coal? Do you risk moving forward and hope nothing explodes? There were no good answers. If you're finding this story interesting, subscribing helps more than you think. By the war's end, the full extent of the damage caused by explosive coal may never be known. German records were incomplete, many were destroyed. Resistance fighters didn't always report their actions, and the devices themselves left no evidence. But the weapon's impact wasn't measured solely in destroyed locomotives. It was measured in delays, in paranoia, in the slow, grinding erosion of Germany's ability to move its war machine efficiently. After the war, the explosive coal became a footnote, overshadowed by tanks, planes, and atomic bombs. But to the engineers at Station 12, it represented something profound. A weapon that didn't need to be seen to be effective. A weapon that turned the enemy's dependence into a weakness. A weapon that proved sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones you never see coming. The British didn't invent sabotage. They didn't invent disguised explosives. But they perfected the art of turning the mundane into the deadly. A lump of coal, harmless, forgettable until it wasn't, and that's why this weapon mattered, not because it won the war, but because it proved that infrastructure, the invisible backbone of any military, is only as strong as the trust placed in it. The moment that trust breaks, the entire system begins to collapse. The Germans learned this the hard way, one lump at a time.